Hello everyone, and thank you very much for coming to what is our fifth public exhibition for Weyside Urban Village, this time focusing on climate change and sustainability. My name is Joseph Baum. You might have met me before. I'm from Curtin & Co, and my picture is just at the top of the screen there. The reason why we're not using webcams for these public exhibitions is because we want to maximise the amount of space that's available for you to see the presentations. I appreciate these presentations are maybe new to what you've been used to. You might not have been to one of our public exhibitions before. I wanted to spend a few minutes explaining exactly what to do for these presentations. So the first step, as I said before, is that we want to maximise the amount of space available so that you can see the presentations this evening. You can do so by going into full screen mode at the bottom right hand corner of the screen using that icon there. So if you could do that now, that would be great. The second thing to say is we want people to send through as many questions as possible over the course of the presentation. I'm pleased to say that over the last few weeks, we've had well over 200 questions that have been asked, and our team are responding to the questions right now as we speak. And you can ask as many questions as you want about climate change and sustainability using the question icon just on the right-hand side and asking a question in the space provided. You can ask as many questions as you want, and those questions will be collated and we will respond to them in due course over the next few days. The third thing to say is if you're not able to attend the whole session today, if you've got something else to do, then please just download the information using the download icon again on the right-hand corner of your screen. Two items can be downloaded this evening. First is the electronic copy of the newsletter that was circulated to community groups and also to councillors over the last few weeks. In addition to that, we've also uploaded a copy of the information that's on display this evening. As with other presentations, recordings of this presentation will be uploaded onto the project website tomorrow morning, as well as all of the information that will be on display as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Lee Edwards to explain a little bit more about why we're here this evening to talk about climate change and sustainability. So over to you, Lee.
Thank you, Joseph. Good evening and welcome to the fifth and final exhibition in this series of events. We have had over 150 residents, as Joseph said, attending these events and have raised over 200 questions. As mentioned previously, this is the first series of events and a second and third series are being held in September and October respectively. Moving on to tonight's presentation, on the 23rd of July 2019, Guildford Borough Council declared a climate emergency and set goals such as net zero emissions by 2030 and set a target path to a plastic-free borough. Whilst we need to review and amend all practices that we've historically added to climate change, we need to be strict about new activities we are carrying out. Construction, energy use, waste reduction, recycling, sustainable travel, and protection and enhancement of our flora and fauna. A review of all of these headings must be carried out when considering any development proposals. Scrutiny of the environmental effects from not only emitted CO2, but from embedded CO2 from the construction process itself. Following construction and placemaking of the Weyside Urban Village, the value of education and the subsequent step change in behaviour are the only way for a real difference to be made. It's quite easy to say people will not get out of their cars, they will not cycle, they will always leave light on, they will not recycle their food waste, they will always walk their dogs over the Surrey heathland. But if the alternatives are an easier choice and education is delivered, it can make a difference. So I'll now introduce you to our project team. As you can see on the screen here, we have Gleeds as our project coordinators, Savills as our planning consultants, ACOM are advising on the infrastructure aspects of the project, JTP are the architects and master planners, Montague Evans are providing all of the property consultancy, Curtin & Co as Joseph alluded to, are our community engagement company. BMD are the landscape architects for the project. Markides Associates are our transport planners and have provided all of the infrastructure engineering. Stantec are providing and supporting the environmental impact assessment for the project. I will now pass you over to Sarah Buden of Savills. Sarah is the planning consultant for the Weyside Urban Village project. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Lee. Good evening, everyone. In previous webinars, we've presented more detail on the planning context, and this information is available on the project website. So this evening, I'm focusing on the key planning context that will inform the sustainability strategy and credentials of the Weyside Urban Village scheme. So starting with the national context, the fundamental aim of the government's national planning policy framework is to achieve sustainable development, meaning that key environmental, social and economic objectives, which are interdependent, need to be pursued in mutually supportive ways. For planning, this means identifying opportunities to support well-designed and sustainable communities that will make efficient use of land and reutilise brownfield land. This is at the heart of the Weyside Urban Village project, which involves ensuring that important infrastructure and key uses are relocated in order to make more efficient use of this brownfield site for a sustainable mix of uses that integrate and benefit existing and future communities. Rebecca from JTP will talk more about this shortly. The government also promotes more sustainable modes of transport and infrastructure for low emission vehicles. Again, this is a fundamental part of the Weyside scheme, and Matthew from Markides will elaborate on this shortly. National policy also supports the incorporation of high quality and reliable communications within developments. The recent pandemic has focused more attention on this, with the necessity of more people working from home, and this is a key consideration for the scheme. The government also requires development to incorporate measures that reduces the risks associated with climate change, which is carried forward in local plan policies. So from a local perspective, policy D2 of the Guildford local plan, strategy and sites, which was adopted in April 2019, also supports the sustainable design and the efficient use of resources, design measures that minimise energy and water consumption and waste, the incorporation of electric car charging points, and measures that promote sustainable lifestyle choices. Policy D2 also requires that new buildings achieve a 20% reduction in carbon emissions. The way in which these measures will be incorporated are covered in more detail by the following presentations as part of this webinar. But in addition, the sustainability and energy statements that are required to be submitted with the planning application will detail how these policy objectives will be achieved by the scheme. Biodiversity net gain is also an emerging policy requirement. So biodiversity net gain is an approach which aims to leave the natural environment in a measurably better state than it was beforehand. Part of the strategy for the Weyside Urban Village scheme is ensuring that the scheme includes suitable alternative natural green space, or what is referred to as SANG. This is aimed at protecting areas of special biological interest and will also provide substantial benefits for local residents by providing accessible and attractive open space as part of the development. The local plan is also supported by supplementary planning documents, notably the Strategic Development Framework SPD, which was adopted in July 2020, and the emerging SPD on climate change, sustainable design, construction and energy, which is anticipated to be adopted in September 2020. These will require that the planning application for Weyside demonstrates how the scheme will provide opportunities to minimise the consumption of energy, integrate sustainable drainage measures into the design and layout, and provide opportunities for sustainable energy generation. Rebecca from JTP will now take you through the sustainable placemaking principles that will inform the master plan for the scheme. Rebecca.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, everyone. So as architects and master planners and as a practice, JTP have undertaken a lot of work in how to deliver sustainable master plans, which are also good for our health. And this next few slides take you through a series of these principles, which I'll briefly run through. They're ultimately the foundation stone of this is what's called the walkable neighbourhood. So designing places that promote walking and cycling and also put facilities within easy reach of residents. So number one here is considering land as a precious resource and making efficient use of brownfield land. So this is discouraging very low density urban sprawl and actually encouraging efficient and effective use of brownfield land where people can live in close proximity to facilities and mixed uses. Number two is to build homes with reduced parking where they are in the most accessible places, and to promote the use of local transport, public transport, cycling and walking, which has all kinds of multiple benefits, including health and well-being benefits and improvements to air quality. The third point on this slide is to build most densely around mixed uses and local facilities. This ensures that there is decent amount of footfall, so enough people around to support those mixed uses, and that then can also ensure their viability in the long term. And we don't end up with shop fronts that are closed and boarded up. We want to create places that are thriving and interesting and where people want to be. The plan on the left is the site boundary of Weyside Urban Village, and really is indicating that in the purple tone that we would be putting higher density and efficient use of land around the local centre, which is indicated with an orange heart, to encourage as many people as possible to walk and cycle, and to also locate bus stops and movement corridors through there, which Marquides Associates will take us through shortly. Next, please. Here we've got a series of further principles in relation to the outdoors primarily. So number 4 is about letting nature in and ensuring that residents have good access to landscape, to public realm, in particular soft landscape that can increase biodiversity, but also provide amenity space and attractive walking and cycling routes, and recreational facilities as well for people and for children. Number 5 is specifically referring to buildings that have apartments. So rather than houses where you're having flatted development that shares staircases and lift cores, ensuring that the numbers of homes that do that are minimised, such that you have a greater opportunity to get to know your neighbours and to meet them. And this, there's a huge amount of evidence to demonstrate this creates healthy communities where people are much more likely to stay and strengthen communities. Number 6 refers to high quality public realm and the importance of creating outdoor space that is well overlooked, has a strong sense of pride, and also encourages people to meet there, to engage in social interaction, and to ensure that that outdoor space is well looked after and well used. Number 7 refers to the aspect of homes, and it's really important that we create homes that have good sunlight and daylight, ideally promoting dual aspect homes. This means, particularly for flatted development, this is having apartments that face 2 directions rather than just one, so that they get direct sunlight at different times of day. And also encouraging and looking out for views from new homes, designing in balconies and terraces to get a better interaction with the outdoors. Next, please. And then the four principles shown here relate to buildings and building materials as well. So number 9, the importance of using robust, long-lasting materials that will grow old gracefully and that will create attractive buildings that have low maintenance requirements. That is a key aspect of creating places that are sustainable in the long term. Number 10 starts to talk about technologies and passive design. So the importance of using passive technology, so harnessing the energy from the sun and looking to design buildings that benefit from that, but also don't overheat in the summer. And then the opportunity to explore how low carbon and renewable energy sources and supplies can also be integrated into those buildings. Number 11 refers to the life cycle of materials, and some of my colleagues touched on this earlier in terms of embodied carbon and the importance of seeking out materials that have a low embodied carbon, and also the importance of reusing things. So we're exploring what the opportunities might be on site, for example, to retain the pump house and reuse that building and repurpose it. and the opportunity there to be able to reuse material on site and ultimately reduce the amount of material that might be taken off site, and in so doing increasing carbon emissions. And then finally, number 12, which is the importance of creating a place that is that has a strong identity and a strong sense of belonging. We've said here something uniquely Weyside, and that's really critical in actually creating a place that is built to last and that people grow to love and enjoy being there. Next, please. This next slide refers to some of the things that we've been learning through the pandemic that we've all been going through and the impact of that on placemaking and things that we'll need to consider going forward. A number of these I've touched on already, but I think the COVID has sort of shone a spotlight into some of these areas, and they're listed on the left here. In particular, the importance of providing access for all homes and all residents and all visitors to high quality green space, the opportunity to live life more outdoors. We've also seen the positive effect that access to nature has had on our mental health over the last few months. We've touched on biodiversity net gain already, but this has absolutely risen up the agenda in terms of the importance here of bringing nature and people together. Thirdly, the importance of improved infrastructure for walking and cycling, discouraging private car use and encouraging movement outdoors. And finally, the importance of home working facilities. So we're all sat at home today in our individual offices or living rooms, and this has really shone a light into the importance of designing homes that have space for people to work at home and also having the digital technology to enable them to do so. So I'll now hand over to Matthew from Markides Associates to run through some of the sustainable transport aspects of the project.
Just a quick one, Rebecca, before Matthew jumps in to talk about transport. We've had quite a few people ask what a SANG is, what it means, and what the purpose is. Could you just touch on that for a minute, if that's okay? Rebecca, are you still with us? It's okay. We'll wait for Phil. Matthew, carry on if that's okay.
Okay, thanks, Joseph. If you could click onto the next slide, please.
Absolutely.
So those of you that have attended one of our previous consultation events will already be familiar with these plans to maximise sustainable travel in the form of walking, cycling and public transport wherever we can. By creating a more sustainable development, ultimately we reduce traffic and car use, we create a healthier place and happier people, and we're able to support the council, the county and the government target to become carbon neutral. By building what we call a mixed use development, we also deliver new employment areas. We're delivering a square with cafes and shops and lots of different green areas as shown on the plan to the right, in addition to the 1,500 new homes. This will lead to what we call an internalisation of trips, i.e. not every resident will need to get in their car to access work, shops and green spaces. They can do this on site and within walking distance. Therefore, there will be less traffic ultimately. Our sustainable transport strategy will contain a number of soft measures, such as a travel plan, which I'll explain in a moment, and hard measures, which include new segregated cycle lanes, improved bus provision, new footway connections. The drawing on the bottom left there shows a kind of a cross section of what we mean by the new road that will run through the heart of the site with the segregated cycling provision. So I'll now go on to explain some of these measures in a bit more detail on the next slide. So following the council's policy, we'll be introducing a new sustainable movement corridor through the heart of the Weyside urban village, connecting Stoke Road and the A25 to the south with Slyfield Industrial Estate to the north. We'll be putting good local connections feeding across the new site and branching into existing residential areas, which will allow both new and existing residents to benefit from this sustainable movement corridor. Along this route, we propose to introduce a new high-frequency bus service connection with a number of new bus stops as shown on the map to the right. This route would be subsidised, at least initially, and implemented as early as possible. We are currently in discussions with both Guildford Borough Council and Surrey County Council on a preferred destination for this route, and we'll be engaging with bus operators on this as well. By having a connection such as this, it would allow residents, both new and existing, an option of reaching their destination without using their car. Finally, we'll be introducing physical bus priority road improvements to improve the speed and reliability of buses, both within the site and along Woking Road, in line with the Council's Sustainable Movement Corridor 5, as shown by the dotted line. As we are aware, ultimately, that the more reliable the service is, the more people that will utilise it. Next slide, please. So with cycling, in addition to bus improvements, we will be implementing upgrades for cycling. The map on the right shows in yellow where it is possible to cycle within 20 minutes from Weyside Urban Village. As you can see, it covers a large proportion of the town, including key nearby train stations and the town centre. Cycling is affordable, improves well-being, is more environmentally friendly, helps reduce congestion, and is often the quickest choice over short distances. National Travel Survey results show that 40% of all urban journeys are under 2 miles, which is the perfect distance for walking and cycling. Many cities across Europe and even some locations in the UK already have 30% of all journeys being made by bicycle. In Guildford, cycling accounts for 3%. So with improved infrastructure, there is real potential for growth with cycling. The measures that we're proposing include a new segregated cycle lane through the site as part of the Sustainable Movement Corridor, new cycle connections into the existing residential areas and connecting to the existing cycle lanes on the A25, e-bike provision and bike sharing, and increased cycle parking. The government, through its Active Travel Fund and decarbonising transport policy, are keen to ensure more of us continue to choose cycling over car use. Next slide, please. The application for this development will be accompanied by a separate report known as a travel plan, and thus will list many different ideas with its aim of reducing car travel. Significantly, we would like existing residents to take advantage of these measures, which could include a cycle centre on site offering several benefits, including the possibility of a cycle dock, i.e. someone who will repair bicycles at a discounted rate, and potentially a cycle hire scheme. A car club could be offered with potentially discounted use, bus tokens for discounted travel on our new bus connection, electric vehicle charging points to encourage the switch from more polluting vehicles, and a car sharing scheme to facilitate carpooling. We would like your views on these proposals. Which measures would you most like to see? Which, as existing residents, would you use? Next slide, please. I think it's important that we prioritise measures to encourage more walking, cycling and public transport use. This will lead to reduced vehicle emissions, better quality environments, and ultimately healthier and happier residents. It is critical that people feel safe in order to choose cycling, and that we provide enough green spaces to encourage physical activity. Inactivity is estimated to cost 8.2 billion in increased healthcare costs across England alone. It is also imperative that we minimise car use where possible. Both Surrey County Council and Guildford Borough Council have declared climate emergencies, with a target of becoming carbon neutral by 2030. Electric vehicles are part of this solution. However, they don't reduce congestion, so a switch to active travel where possible is key. Thank you very much for listening to me. I will now pass you over to Stuart, who will present our energy strategy for the site.
Thank you. Many thanks, Matt. Good evening. My name's Stuart Guarneri and I'm a Director of Infrastructure at ACOM. I'm here to talk to you about what we're planning at Weyside in terms of the energy strategy. So this development is proposed to be highly efficient and sustainable in terms of energy infrastructure, and the emerging energy strategy for the site underpins this. Traditionally, developments of this size would either be heated by gas-fired boilers in each home or via a centralised district heating system containing larger gas boilers and engines. However, that's not what we're going to be doing here. Firstly, it's planned as a gasless development. Emerging policy from central government is that by 2025, gas for heating in new residential developments will not be permitted. And this is because going gasless is better for the environment, as the recent pushes into green energy generation in the national grid means that the electricity network is now more carbon friendly than the gas network. And this is known as the decarbonisation of the national grid. The graph on the right of this banner shows how the carbon intensity of electrical generation is falling and predicted to drop going forward, primarily due to the phasing out of coal generation and the expansion of renewable energy sources. So taking all that into account, it's proposed that all residential property heating needs will be met using energy efficient electrical air source heat pump technology. Now, these are far more efficient than traditional electric heating, and modern units can provide residential heating for the same cost or lower than gas, whilst being considerably better for the environment. So typically, your typical gas boiler in a house will run at roughly 85% efficiency, whereas an air source heat pump can run at 400% efficiency or even higher, meaning that for every 1 kilowatt of electricity you use, you get 4 kilowatts of heat produced. And also, some of the more modern units can cool as well as heat, which is becoming increasingly relevant in a warming world. Heat pumps work by generating heat using the difference in temperature between outside a building and inside a building, known as the temperature delta. Now, the exact type of heat pump and whether they're water loop based or refrigerant loop based is yet to be decided, but the premise of electrical heating is accepted. For those of you who are interested, the schematic on the bottom right of the slide shows how a typical air source heat pump network works. Now, I know there are often concerns as to the running cost of electrical heating when compared to gas heating, and it's true that the unit price of electricity is higher than gas. However, the generating efficiency of the system means that you use less, and the cost differential at the moment is marginal and will only continue to improve as the systems become more efficient in the future. But what's truly important is not that we just install the infrastructure to allow a sustainable development, to install the power network to allow electrical heating. To be truly sustainable, the residential housing developers need to ensure sustainability and efficiency is at the heart of their proposals too. Part of the work we're doing is the formalisation of developer design guides and codes, which will either encourage or commit exemplar sustainable development. Whilst these are in their early stages at the moment, they will contain sections on energy efficiency, insulation, the use of on-plot renewable generation, such as ground source heat and photovoltaics to supplement the air source network, and also water management and recycling. That's all from me, so thanks very much for listening. I hope it was useful, and now I'm going to hand over to Phil, who is going to talk about biodiversity.
Thank you, Stuart. Good evening, everybody. I will just cover off the query on the SANG first that Joseph raised earlier. A SANG is a suitable alternative natural green space, and it is within the local plan policy, Guildford local plan, and within the county council provision in order to offset natural green space due to the location of Weyside Urban Village from the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area. So effectively, it's because we're at Weyside within the zone of influence of the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area, there is a requirement at Weyside to provide suitable alternative natural green space. And by green space, that means providing outdoor green space for leisure and nature to thrive. I hope that's cleared that. If there's any other queries, we can answer them through the usual procedure. So in terms of biodiversity and landscape, the headline is very much about protection and conservation of the River Wey, whilst it's not in the site area, also respecting the nature reserve south of the site. The landscape principles not only provide green links for people to enjoy, they also create opportunities for habitat and wildlife corridors that aren't currently there on site at the moment. There will need to be areas that are set aside exclusively for nature and wildlife to thrive, but it's really key that we ensure that biodiversity is embedded in all aspects of the design and not set aside as fenced off areas. And this can include roadsides and verges and parking areas and trees incorporated in those areas, and roofs and gardens and all aspects of the built environment we can integrate with biodiversity net gain. It's key to underline that point as well, that we are going to achieve biodiversity net gain for this project, and that will be assessed independently. Thank you. Next slide, please. So our green infrastructure and the evolving landscape design will be grounded very much in augmenting the existing habitats, enhancing and extending these as a baseline. So we really work with what is on the site at present and enhance that. But also in addition to this, we'll be looking at opportunities to create new habitats in line with the ecological recommendations and council policy, so that the biodiversity net gain really is holistic and balanced for future generations. Some examples of public green infrastructure that will be elements within the landscape design are biodiverse roofs, communal and private gardens, orchard spaces, drainage infrastructure, which is combined with ecology, and specific measures aimed at protecting, conserving, and enhancing particular key species on the site. All of the time, our design needs to be conscious of the need to deliver a place that people can enjoy as well and be proud of. And through that local ownership and accountability, nature and wildlife can thrive. In our experience, it really is when you get local people involved in caring about a place that all aspects of the built environment are successful. Thank you. Next slide. On that theme, there's a really strong link between nature and health and happiness and health and well-being research, and this is getting stronger. The evidence for this is getting stronger all the time. The creation of new links to and along the beautiful River Wey in a respectful and appropriate way for people, plants and animals will help encourage biodiversity and enhance it. Integrating spaces where people can dwell and play and enjoy the outdoors, but most importantly, recognizing that these spaces can offer so much in terms of ecology and biodiversity if correctly designed. It's really a key point that we want to get across here, that it's not just about the places that are set aside, but it's where people can actually be and interact with nature that helps biodiversity net gain. If the routes that we provide and the dwell spaces are legible, it means that other areas can be left if needed, but aren't impacted upon by humans in the same way as when legible routes are not there and dwell spaces are not there, because people find their own way into other areas. Thinking about the long-term management and maintenance is really key, and utilising both local authority provision and also the local people provision to create a partnership that really creates biodiversity balance and helping to champion it within the local communities is critical. Communal space is important, and so is private space. Everyone has the opportunity to impact the space around them in their communities or in their homes, and gardens are really important in encouraging and engaging people in ecology and biodiversity. If everyone does a little bit, the gains can be huge. And so finally, we just wanted to try and bring it home and make it a bit more real. And we've set out a mock day in the life of someone living on this development. Can I have the next slide, please? And in this, it's just schematic and diagrammatic and not too specific, but trying to show how the journey through a day for a family in this case can help aid health and well-being, as well as biodiversity and ecological enhancement. So number one in the top left of both the diagram and the pictures, there's an opportunity to be active and engage with landscape on a physical level, understanding materials, plants, trees, and how these elements contribute to enhance biodiversity. Moving on to number two, specific focal points within the green infrastructure that provide learning opportunity, from simple naming of plants or trees or animals to more in-depth interpretation boards or activity trails to really engage and excite people. Number three, something as simple as picking fruit from a tree or plant can help enormously with people understanding and appreciating natural processes and our reliance and interactedness with plants and animals and the natural world. Number four, place-based opportunity. It's a much underutilized resource when it comes to ecological enhancement, but place-based really can make a big difference if it's well designed and it includes really good ecological input, as well as being really important for social cohesion and community building. Number five, taking a walk along the beautiful riverside, the Riverway. A larger portion of the area for biodiversity net gain will be along the river corridor in an appropriate way and sensitive way, but it's really a special asset. And number six, linked to number five, but highlighting importance of dwell space, key views and vistas in and out, and creating successful places. And number seven, ensuring that where there are more urban and hard spaces, we also make these work really hard to contribute to biodiversity enhancement, creating a real understanding of how nature and man-made elements come together, integrate, and can work together. And finally, number eight, pocket parks in urban spaces. These are little kind of jewels of green that are interspersed within urban form, but can give both wildlife and planting a space to breathe and establish. And ideally, they should link up with green routes and corridors as part of a series of green stepping stones that go through development and connect nature into a cohesive system. Thank you for your time. I'm going to hand over to Rebecca from JTP.
Thank you, Phil. So this section of the presentation refers to primarily buildings and how we build sustainable buildings. We are, of course, preparing an outline application for Weyside Urban Village, so we won't be designing the buildings in detail. However, we do need to understand their performance as part of our overall energy strategy for the neighbourhood. This triangle on the screen is the energy hierarchy, and it starts at the top with the most important aspect, which is to design buildings to be more energy efficient, so that ultimately they use less energy in the first place. Second down the hierarchy is the energy supply and ensuring that that is as efficient as possible. And then the third in the hierarchy, the least important, if you like, is integration of renewables. So I'm just going to take you through a few principles under the what is called Be Lean, so how we can design buildings to use less energy in the first place. Next slide, please. So this approach is called fabric first, which is ultimately about designing the envelope of buildings to be as high quality and airtight as possible to avoid leaky buildings. The first principle on the top left is about orientation. We've got opportunities to lay buildings out along streets such that they maximise solar gain from south, east and west facing facades. That of course does need to be controlled as well through things like solar shading and louvers to ensure that we don't have overheating problems, but there are huge gains to be had through passive solar design. The next is called airtightness, and the importance here is of ensuring that there aren't poor construction details where we get leaky buildings, and also what's called thermal bridging, so cold points where outdoor cold can travel through into the building and severely compromise the performance of the building. Linked to that as well is the third one, insulation, and the importance of creating a thick layer of insulation around your buildings, and that is continuous, and that can have a huge beneficial impact on performance. You may be aware of the passive house concept, which supports all of these principles here, and typically passive house buildings have a huge depth of insulation in their envelope. The fourth on the top right is to do with thermal mass. This is typically achieved through heavier materials such as concrete, which can absorb heat during the day and then release it during the evening and during the night when typically buildings might be cooler. And then the three principles along the bottom left is to do with insulation and heating, and ensuring that high levels of insulation help to keep heat in during the winter and also help to keep heat out during the summer. The middle one at the bottom is to do with ventilation, and of course the importance of having openable windows such that you can have what might be called purge ventilation, the ability to ventilate your home. And I'm sure at the moment with this warmer weather, that's exactly what we're all doing. And then lastly, on the bottom right, exploring opportunities for installation of renewables, typically on roofs, through whether it be solar panels, photovoltaic panels, solar thermal panels for generating energy on homes. And that then has implications on how we might design roofs and the way that those roofs face. So all of those principles are to do with the envelope of the building, and we call them fabric first principles, and they are a key way of ensuring that buildings need less energy. Next, please. Another aspect of building sustainable buildings is to do with the lifestyle and quality of life for residents. This set of diagrams suggests a typical U-shaped building. This would be typically a block of apartments, an apartment building, and the benefits of this configuration, if you were to have a U-shaped building that opens up, you can see the third diagram along, opens up to the south, the east or the west, so that you get really good daylight sunlight deep into the U shape of that apartment building, and you don't end up with apartments that are compromised in terms of daylight and sunlight penetration. There are minimum guidance standards from the BRE, the Building Research Establishment, that sets good practice guidance on daylight sunlight into dwellings, and that's certainly something we'd be seeking to meet at Weyside Urban Village. The other benefit of these sort of U-shaped courtyard buildings is the opportunity to provide private amenity space, as well as public amenity space around the base of those buildings, and the opportunity to connect soft landscape that might be at podium level with the landscape on the outside. So rather than a perimeter block which prevents that happening, these U-shaped buildings have the opportunity for a connected landscape. So that's one of the building types that we're going to be exploring at Weyside. Next, please. We then have important priorities in relation to overheating. Of course, with climate change comes a much greater risk of designing buildings that in the future might become uncomfortably warm as our summers get warmer. This is particularly an issue for apartment buildings, and this varies across the facade. So the top left diagram shows that quite often at the bottom of buildings you might be having challenges in terms of daylight sunlight and overshadowing, whereas at the top of buildings for third, fourth, fifth floors you might be having bring more of a risk of overheating depending on the orientation of those dwellings. So it's really important that in the design code, where we're setting out the principles of building design, that we ensure we take these factors into account and that we have the right proportion of solid to void on our facades to avoid some of these things happening. The diagram then below that one simply sets out the importance of providing solar shading. So this is a section through a typical building where, for example, projecting balconies are really helpful because they provide solar shading to the apartment that might be below them. But then the importance of a top floor apartment needing to have solar shading to prevent, for example, living rooms and large spaces where you might have more glazing becoming at risk of overheating in the summer. And then on the right hand side, this is setting out the little diagrams, a typical sequence for the construction of a modular unit. So across lots of residential projects now, the industry is being challenged to explore opportunities for modular construction and volumetric construction. And we've set out some of the benefits of this on the top right here. There's key benefits in terms of waste. On-site waste is significantly reduced. There's of course speed benefits. Construction is typically much quicker as lots of the components are factory created and can arrive on site largely complete. That also brings with it quality improvements because they can be factory controlled. A key aspect as well of modular construction is that there can be quite significantly reduced impacts. So where you have sites that are abutting neighbours and existing residences, construction impacts can be reduced through not only shorter periods on site, but also simply noise and dust and dirt and those sorts of things. And there are, of course, performance benefits as well. So where we're talking about things like air tightness and those sorts of quality aspects of building, that can be significantly enhanced when you use modular construction. So we think there's some opportunities here to explore the use of modular also at Weyside Urban Village, which can bring along some of these benefits. Next, please. So the next couple of slides simply have sought to create some imaginary characters who could be living at Weyside Urban Village or living in Wayfield adjacent to Weyside Urban Village in the future, and really capturing some of those stories of what we see some of the benefits could be. So the first here, a resident of Wayfield, a retired gentleman who really, and I won't read these out, they'll be available for you to read at your leisure, but the emphasis here is the importance and the opportunity of walking to the river in a much quicker time from what is currently, he says here, it used to take 12 minutes to get to the river, but of course with new connections through from Wayfield's neighbourhood, you can get to the river much more quickly, and the enjoyment of seeing young families walking along the river, children learning about nature, and then to sit and watch the world go by in the village cafe. Next, please. This is a story from a potential future resident, somebody who is an app developer living at Weyside Urban Village, who was struggling to get on the property ladder and was able to buy a 2-bedroom flat on the shared ownership scheme. And the second paragraph refers to the location in being able to get to the station for commuting into London, but also being able to work from home from a home office, and if wanting to head out, potentially going to a kind of co-working space in the pump house, that might be something that we could explore. So it's really sort of setting out some of the benefits of home working and the great location that Weyside offers in terms of access into Guildford and further afield. Next, please. So this is a story of another resident, an accountant who works at the university for the finance department and who likes to cycle to work along the towpath, and the benefits really of those great cycle connections, and also being able to cycle into Guildford. And I'm sure everybody has heard the huge uptake in cycling that we've had through the COVID pandemic, and we think there's a groundsway, really, an opportunity to really encourage people onto bikes if safe, attractive cycle routes are provided as part of the proposals. Next, please. And then this is the last one. This is from a child's perspective, a child who goes to Wayfield Academy, to the school there, and setting out the opportunities really of being able to scoot to school with play on the way, which are small play areas in amenity spaces, and potentially the new green space next to the existing primary school, which might offer the opportunity for new play. And then in the second paragraph, she refers to being able to go to the community centre in Weyside Urban Village, where she goes to brownies, and where there's also fitness classes for her mum at the same place. So do feel free to read these at a later date. They're really a way of starting to help us imagine what the opportunities are at Weyside for creating a truly sustainable new place. Thank you. I'll hand over to Lee now.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. Hopefully you found some of the information, or if not all of it, useful this evening. As we did say, this is the first series of events. So there will be a second series in September and a following series in October. And the idea is to elaborate on all of these, all of the feedback that we've received, and to see how that features within the new plans for the development. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your time this evening, and a big thank you for your support and feedback on these events. Your feedback is extremely important, and it's great to see that there's so many questions this evening. As mentioned earlier, there are several ways to provide us your feedback and to ask questions. These are by email, by telephone, via the project website, or by traditional post. The project team will be answering all of those questions over the coming week, and a copy of this presentation will be available from tomorrow on the project website. Please remember that you can review all of these presentations on the website if you haven't had the opportunity to date. So thank you once again, and I will pass you over to Joseph.
Thank you very much, Lee, and thank you very much to everyone who has asked questions this evening. I hope you had a chance to ask as many as you like, and I'm pleased to say that we've had many questions come through. For those that ask questions regarding car usage, I appreciate that some people may not know this, but there was actually a session on highways and transport last week. So please do feel free to go onto the project website to watch the video in your own time. And if you've got any questions about that, then do please drop us an email, and our contact details are on the project website for you. As Lee was saying, and as others have said before, this is the start of what is quite an intense but meaningful process of engagement over the next few weeks and months. We've had a number of public exhibitions so far, but we intend to carry that on in September and October, and we're going to spend the rest of August reviewing the feedback that's come through, trying to adapt the master plan and adapt the proposals in light of your questions and in light of your comments. So please continue to send those through, and we'll review them, and then what we'll do is work on a draft master plan to present to the community and to residents in September, and then we will do another public exhibition in October before submitting an outline planning application by the end of the year, with a reserved matters application to follow. What I'd like to ask you now, if you can, is to fill in a survey that allows us some information that we will go away and think about over the course of the summer. If you're not able to fill in a survey now, you can also fill one out on our project website. It's exactly the same form. Please encourage as many people as possible to fill that out. We will look at the feedback, and then, as I say, we will adjust the proposals. So I'm going to end the session now, but thank you very much for coming, and we will respond to your questions over the next few days. Thanks very much, and goodbye. Take care.